Hi, I'm Victor Lambs, and you're listening to The Secrets of Stargate, where we talk about hidden meanings and deeper layers found in the Stargate movies, TV series, and more. And joining me today are Jeff Haecker. Hello, Jeff.
Hey, Victor.
And Lisa Jones. Hi, Lisa.
Hey, Victor.
And today we are discussing the third episode of Season 9 of Stargate SG1, Origin. In this episode, Daniel and Vala, still in the bodies of villagers, are taken to the Ori city on the planet Celestis to be converted. Daniel reads the Book of Origins and learns of the Ori's plan to convert or cleanse the Milky Way. They try to warn Earth but are caught and sentenced to death. Back on Earth, the Prior self-destructs. There was a Prior who had come through a Stargate and talked to Jaffa, and there was this whole thing with Garrick and stuff. We'll get into it. And Daniel and Vala are saved. The Ori prepare for war, and Daniel expresses fear for the first time. O'Neill assures him they can win, and it's clear that Robert C. Cooper has never once stepped foot in a church. Alrighty then. What did you think of this episode, Jeff?
Yeah, I've been the defender of season 9 and 10, and I still really enjoy them. But yeah, I think this episode, it really was the continuation of the last, and it does set up who the villains are, who the Ori are, and kind of who, how they're different than the ancients, and kind of all that. So I think the setup is good, but yeah, as I've watched it a couple times since, I don't enjoy this as much because it is very critical of religion and not a very intelligent criticism, I would say. So, but still a good setup for the season. You get the Jaffa stuff going on because that's going to be a big part of the next couple seasons as well. So, I think it's good for setup. But yeah, unfortunately, it's probably not good for much else.
What did you think of this episode, Lisa?
Okay, so remember when I said I was going to be sick for seasons 9 and 10? I actually am sick, but I couldn't not be here because I kept threatening it, and somebody would accuse me of doing it on purpose because we have had a comment that I'm too hard on seasons 9 and 10. Even though I was the positive voice last time, remember, just keep that in mind. This was really hard for me to watch. And I actually watched it twice because I kept tuning it out. Yeah, there's so much about this that I don't like that it's hard to think of anything positive. Vala and Daniel made it back safely to SG1. To the SGC. That was good. That was good news. Colonel O'Neill showed up. That was amazing. I liked that. Yeah, and we learned a whole lot about the origin, about the religion, and a whole lot of very confusing stuff about the difference between the ancients and the Ori, and why one are bad and one are good, and how Daniel always felt like he's been protected and been overseen, not by God, of course, but evidently by the ancients, and now they're gone, and he's stuck with the Ori, and he doesn't know what to do, but there's going to be fire involved. How was that?
That was pretty good. Yeah, so watching the commentary provides some additional context. First of all, I like that Julian Sands is in this episode. He is a great character actor, plays in a lot of horror movies. In Galaxy Quest, he played, the evil alien creature. In Buffy, he played Ethan Rayne, who is kind of Giles's foil there. He's the one who enchants all the Halloween costumes because he worships the god of chaos. So I like seeing Julian Sands.
Okay.
He's always fun. Yeah. He's fun to see. He does a really good job. Unfortunately, he doesn't come back, but yeah. And so watching the commentary, you get the feeling that it wasn't maliciousness about how they treat religion. It was just an overall sense of cluelessness. Like they were just completely clueless about religion, and they weren't expected for the backlash they got from fans, even as this was airing. And it's not as a defense, but they did mention, so they got renewed for their 9th season. They found out in December of, I think, 2004 or whenever it was, that they were renewed for a 9th season. And these episodes aired in, I think, June or July of the following year. So they had less than 6 months to come up with, basically reboot the show, hire a new cast, write the episodes, film the episodes, do all the VFX, and then basically get them onto the air in around 6 or 7 months, which is incredibly impressive. So, but yeah, it's pretty clear from the commentary with Robert C. Cooper that he thought he was writing, like how religious people talk. It's clear, when Cam Mitchell says, I have a grandma who is a Bible thumper and just read the Bible all the time. And then he gives like a very Catholic sounding church name. She went to like St. Hilda of the, and you're like, okay, she can be like, it's clear that his exposure to religion has all been through like old women in Stephen King movies, the whole like, you're a sinner and you'll burn, that whole thing. And it's clear he's never actually like read the Bible, because all of his like pseudo religious stuff just sounds like Stephen King character, but so I don't think he's doing it maliciously. I just think he thought it would be a neat idea, and then was like surprised when everybody said, hey, you're making fun of our religion and you're not treating it very respectfully. He's like, whoa, you're like, what are you talking about? I'm just writing a TV show here. And he actually thought he was doing a good job. He actually thought he was capturing, he even makes a comment on the commentary about how like, people said I should start my own religion because I captured the religious language so good, and you're like, no, you really didn't. Anyways, so that's not a defense, but kind of like what's going on in the background. They were up against the wall. He needed to come up with a super big bad right away, and kind of took the lazy way out.
Remember we talked about how they have a room that they have to go into and like prove up what we talked about, I think last week or a couple weeks ago with
the how
Atlantis
room.
And they didn't take this idea to that room, and like nobody in there went like, hang on.
He's the showrunner, I guess, so maybe he doesn't have to do that.
They wanted their jobs.
Yeah, I mean, and again, they had to cast Beau Bridges and, all the, Alexa Doig and stuff. And
which, great. Love them. It just, to create a new big, bad, evil, what do you call it? Like race or people you're up against. I just, I don't know what to say. It's just not good.
Yeah, because the problem is now, and I think it's the problem for any reboot, and I think it's what Stargate Universe, what was the problem with them is you basically had evil superpowered beings, and you defeat them, and then what do you do with that? Where do you go from there? And we've seen stuff like that in some of the recent Star Trek Discovery seasons, where they come up with off the wall stuff, and so I could see maybe that's why Stargate hasn't rebooted yet, because they haven't come up with a better idea, and I'm fine with that. I'd rather them come up with a good idea and wait. But yeah, it's part of the problem of the Ori as the big bad is how are you going to defeat them? And the way they defeat them in the end is maybe kind of a cop out too. But we'll, that's more to come later.
2 seasons in a movie before we find that out. Yeah.
I just love the whole episode. It's like, oh no. Oh, this is bad. Oh, wait, this is really bad. Yeah, I mean,
and Daniel gets to go, did I do that? And like the audience laughs, because Steve Urkel, you did that.
Like for the rest of the show, it gets worse and worse. Like the Ori just like keep coming and coming and coming.
Yep.
And like they really don't have like an up, they don't have like we defeated, like they do in earlier seasons of SG1. Oh, we defeated Apophis. We defeated Ball. Like they don't really, or whoever, they don't have like a period, really a lull of like, oh, we're safe now because we defeated this big bad. It's the Ori are pretty much the constant threat. And it was, I did find it interesting that they had the ancients kind of shielding the Milky Way, and I guess the Pegasus galaxy. I guess however many galaxies the ancients were involved in from the Ori. Because
apparently the Asgard's home galaxy too, right? Because the Asgard
I guess so. So yeah, you kind of get that was kind of an interesting idea of that maybe the ancients were doing something, but now that the Ori know, then they're coming, and so I don't think we ever really get an ancient versus Ori type of thing, like actual ancients fighting Ori. I don't think we do. So it's like the lot, and there's one ancient we'll meet, or a couple ancients we'll meet that kind of are involved, but there's no like ancient versus Ori, which could have been something interesting, but they didn't do that. So
yeah. And can we get these guys to quit? It's kind of like they're doing the Rodney Shepherd thing where they're like, hey, we're from Earth. don't you want to come meet all
Yeah.
our people? Hey, come back to
Yeah.
Stargate
And they
Command.
brought
Like,
Pryor
Yeah.
back. They brought
Yeah.
they have the worst
Yeah.
security. Like you take him to the Alpha site or something, or at least they took him right back to Stargate
Yeah.
Command.
right.
And the whole reason they did is because they thought he was just like a religious kook, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, oh, this guy's harmless. He's just spouting some religious nonsense.
Yeah.
Let's take him back and we'll like,
Let's have coffee and just laugh, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
it's like the people who trace around the college campuses, trying to, overzealous and no, a little more dangerous than that.
Yeah, I mean, there are some nice touches in this episode. I did like the priors that we see in this episode. Apparently, because they were in a mad scramble to, they didn't really align on like what the deal was going to be with the priors. Like they made the first couple of prior actors shave their heads because they wanted the priors to be bald. But then at the end of this episode, we see kind of a human becoming a prior, and he doesn't have to shave his head. And then they were like, well, the priors, they're all blind. So, the idea was that they were all seeing, so they didn't really need to look at anything. So the first, prior we meet on, whatever planet, he kind of does that blind thing very well. But then the prior we meet on the Jaffa planet, he actually looks at things. So they didn't really make it consistent whether the priors were blind but all seeing, or still needed to look at things, or if they were all bald or not. They have, I do like their kind of their face makeup where they're kind of like in white face, and then they have like weird, like, kind of almost Jaffa like burn or tattoo marks on their face. So I do like that. And I do like Julian Sands. I like his outfit in this episode a lot. I just wish that he'd been able to come back a few more times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't realize they were supposed to be blind. I always just assumed it was just like part of the look. It was just to differentiate them with having like the gray contacts or whatever. But
they may drop it. Like the idea was that they were going to be like physically blind, but all seeing otherwise. But I think they just like gave up on that in this episode.
yeah, I don't really recall any like instances of using that as like a way to fool the priors or anything.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we get Daniel and Vala escapades while they're like in the waiting room reading the book, and Vala gets to clown around and eat and be like, I was hungry and stuff, and Daniel's like, oh, you, and while he's trying to read the book, but we do get some good, like I said, the dialogue where Daniel's trying to figure out exactly what's going on with first the prior and then the docile is pretty good, I would say. And kind of does a good job of exposition. And then we do get some moments of realization where Daniel and Vala are like, oh, wait, we just basically unleashed the worst horror imaginable upon our galaxy, didn't we? And it's like, yep. And I'm kind of glad that Daniel is afraid and taken a bit aback at the end of the episode, especially after Hallen or Harry and Solace or whatever get burned alive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's horrible. And like Robert C. Cooper in the commentary is like, what you gonna do? Because like Michael Shanks and Vala, Claudia Black were like, okay, when we come back in the infirmary, we kind of want to like look at each other and realize how horrible it is that the people whose bodies we were inhabiting were like burned alive. We don't want to just like drop back into it and be okay with this. And Robert C. Cooper was like, nah, we don't need to do that. Just get back on your feet and walk out of, type of thing. And you're like, no, this is actually horrible.
This is
like
pretty
what
horrifying.
happened?
Yeah.
Yeah. What happened? We at least need a beat to, and apparently like, the two villagers, once they are back in their bodies, were supposed to like turn to each other and say, I love you, like as they were being burned alive and stuff. And they cut that out and stuff because they were confused that people would think that it was Daniel and Vala saying that they loved each other or something, which is, I don't know, but yeah, because after one episode, why not? Right. It took eight seasons for Sam and Jack to get to that point.
I'm glad you acknowledged it together now.
Yeah, I am like, yeah.
And no, Sam, she's not back yet in this episode.
No, not yet. Nowhere to be seen.
Yep. The band is not back together yet.
We do get Lou Gossett Jr. though as Garrick or Garrick or Garrick. I don't know. and he's the the pretender to the Jaffa throne, or I guess the actual guy on the Jaffa throne now.
Yeah.
Because he killed the actual first prime to whatever Gould he'd been serving, and he comes through with Teal'c to meet General Landry, and they exchange some pleasantries. Landry does more of his quoting, in this case, George Washington. And I guess it's okay. It would have been cool to see that scene play out between the two of them, like what's actually going to happen here. But then Mitchell brings the prior back, and then Garrick is like fixated on the prior. It's like, ooh, I want to hear more about what this prior has to say about his false gods, because that's like right up my alley or something.
I do think that angle is interesting in all this, that the Jaffa are just recently freed, and their whole, lives, generations going back, have been slaves to false gods, right? They've lived this. And now all of a sudden they're free, and they're fighting for control, and who's going to be, what kind of government are we going to have, and who's going to rule us, and all that kind of stuff. And then in walks the priors and the Ori and this new false religion. We do see it, how it's going to impact the Jaffa. And you see it right here, that it's like, wait a minute, and they do talk about it for just a few minutes, that unlike the Gould, who were just human parasites with a parasite that knew a lot about technology, these guys actually have supernatural powers. So it's not fake. There's real power. So they're not gods, but they have power. So I thought that little nugget in there was good, because it's a look at the possibility of what could happen to Jaffa, looking, as they're struggling in their new society.
Yeah, I did think that was good. I thought Lou Gossett Jr.'s like outfit was really cool too.
He must be a big dude.
Yeah, I can't remember like other roles, like relative to other actors very well, but yeah, so I did like seeing him. And then of course we get the prior in the briefing room, and we get lots of like, dancing around. It's like, well, do you not believe in a higher power? It's like, well, we believe all perspectives are valid, type thing. It's like, it's like, well, don't you like feel yourself accountable to something? We believe we're accountable to the truth, and it's like, it's like,
yeah, very
wrong answers, folks. Yeah.
Very weird.
Yeah. And we even get that at the end too, which Robert C. Cooper put in the episode. From the commentary, it's clear that he put it in as kind of like, or maybe somebody made him put it in at the end. It's like, well, what if these people like are gods? And Landry said like, well, we just have to believe that someone is looking out for us too. It's like the most like anemic, okay, well, who, what,
Yeah.
Landry's like, I had a grandma too, because only grandmas are interested in religion, right, kids?
Grandmas with Southern accents.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do eventually find out there are a couple ancients that we'll meet that work looking out for humans and for the galaxy. So that kind of pays off. That'll pay off then. But yeah, it is interesting to see how we'll there's the priors they can do all this stuff, like you were saying. They have these powers, and how are they can come into different worlds, and and a lot of these are low technology places that aren't that far from being freed from the Gould or the Jaffa. And it's meet the new boss, same as the old boss kind of a thing. Like these can show power, and they'll, like, in the face of starvation and disease and other things, like what will they do? So it does bring up some interesting questions with that. How will populations kind of face that, and what will Earth's role be in that?
We've seen that. I mean, just think about geopolitical situations, right? You destroy one government, or a dictator or something happens, and the people search for another person. I mean, you could, let's say Cuba, the revolution, and then they found a new government, savior person that was supposed to fix everything, and ended up being pretty horrible too. So it happens not just in a religious sense, but so I like that aspect of it, but not.
So what?
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that the intelligence agencies on Earth instigated a color revolution against the Goa'uld, put up a new puppet regime that turned out to be way worse than the Goa'uld ever was.
See, like that. Can we get the NID involved? Come on.
Yeah, exactly.
That would have been more interesting.
Yeah.
But going back to the discussion, I'm still shocked that not one person on that SGC base, when they're having this discussion about religion and origin on the Ori, they have not one person in there who has any authentic interaction with religion in their lives. Not even, I mean, not talking just Christianity, but like any religion. Like nothing. Not a single person in that room, except for two of them mentioning their grandmas, had any sense of, and we go back to first season SG1 and, gosh, what was that episode? Where Carter's ex-fiance, remember, pretended he was a god, and they talk about, she says to Jack, like, remember the commandments and blah, blah, blah. I mean, so like Carter, we know, has had some influence in religion. She's not here.
It's Canada is the only thing I can think of. It's Vancouver in the 2000s. I mean, the director of photography was on the commentary too and made some joke about how like my invisible friend can beat up your invisible friend to like, it's like Reddit atheism here basically. And it's Reddit atheism before there was Reddit atheism. And, it's just the whole secular atheism that you see. I don't know if it's unique to Canada or not, but it seems to be most prevalent in the shows that were coming out of Vancouver at this time, where they're really, demonstrate a lack of understanding of anything metaphysical or supernatural was a better show in this regard, actually. So,
yeah, it is an interesting contrast with Atlantis, because you do have characters like you do have Tayla, who is very spiritual and believes in the ancestors, and her people do, and lots of the people they encounter believe in the ancestors. So it's you just wish a little of that could have made its way over here and had at least one character who was could have found the base chaplain or something, the SGC chaplain or something to come and talk to the prior or something.
Just have something personal to turn back to I don't know. I felt like that's what was missing here, was this whole dancing around. We don't actually believe stuff, where we tolerate all of it, but we don't actually know anything or believe anything.
There's a lot of differences of opinion, and that's all it is, differences of opinion. And that's why we'll oppose you, priors, because we have a different opinion from you. It's. I did like though how they just do that. How there's a Stargate, and you're like, oh, what's this Stargate? And it's very clearly a Milky Way Stargate, and the prior just walks through it, and you're like, wow, I thought this was like untold number of galaxies away, and then all of a sudden they found a way just to activate a Stargate on a Milky Way planet. That's like pretty powerful, because I mean, we've spent a whole season of Atlantis trying to get a ZPM that will allow us to like dial between two very close galaxies, and now the priors can just like, nope, boop, we're on your front door there.
Well, as we find out later in the season or next season, I can't remember which, they when they get the supergate, like they power them. They're like powered through like black holes basically, or through a supernova or something like, I forget what exactly it was, but so I mean they have this power that they can tap, and that like they can. Yeah, it's interesting to think of like, did the prior dial, did they dial from Celestis to, how many, did they go through other galaxies, or did they just dial straight from Ori Galaxy to because I don't think they ever identify the Ori Galaxy in terms of like where it actually would be in the universe.
No, that's interesting that I hadn't really thought of it from that perspective, that, Daniel and Vala were too far away with the communication stones, some far galaxy far away. And then and then all of a sudden the Ori just walks into the Milky Way. I mean, and then you invite him in.
Exactly. Yeah, and he self-immolates, which isn't really something that, Christians are known for doing, despite the way the Ori are dressed. And they're talking about like, these guys are like just basically fighting a war of like religious expansion through like conquest. It must be like a crusade. And I'm thinking there's actually a much better word for that would have been known to everybody in the early 2000s. But
Could you say that in the early 2000s?
No,
You really
No,
can't
you
say it now,
couldn't.
because even in the, like the Dune movies, they call it a holy war. They don't call it
Yeah.
the other word. So
Yeah. And they do say that it was interesting that they gave the Ori believe in free will, right? They don't force people. People have free will to worship them, which, does hark to Christianity, right? We have free will to love God and to worship God. And but in the Ori's case, but then they kill you if you don't.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of, like, I don't know when this will air, but we've seen a lot of discourse just in the couple of weeks of people saying, like, no one was forced to get the COVID vaccines, right? Like, if you didn't receive them, you would lose your job, and like you wouldn't be able to travel, and you wouldn't be able to like leave your house, but nobody was forced to.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, And so I think that's kind of like how the Ori are. It's like, we're not forcing you to, believe in us. It's just, if you don't, you'll be burned in a weird, like,
fire thing.
Fire spiral. Yeah.
Yeah. That's not so much free will. I mean, just.
Yeah, exactly. It's but yeah, so it and then I do like how Cameron Mitchell has the idea, Cam does get some cool scenes in this, even before he gets to go Joe Redding with Jack O'Neill, but he has the idea, they're like, well, what are we going to do even if we throw this communication device, because Daniel and Vala are going into, cardiac shock again because they're being burned alive again. And they're like, well, even if we throw this through the gate, like, it'll still maintain its connection and we can't blow it up with C4. And he has the idea to basically vaporize it in the event horizon of the, wormhole that's being established when they dial up Abydos, which my son was able to point out, that's the Abydos address there that Walter's dialing, but
anywhere. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Well, except the Ascended. Didn't the Ascended Abydos? Yeah, don't dial the black hole planet again. But didn't the Ascended Abydosians say like the gate will only be there until you leave, and then it won't exist anymore?
Yeah, I guess so.
I think so. Yeah.
So they dialed a non-existent gate. But yeah, it's because that's the
footage.
That's the footage they had was the Abydos gate. It's been a few years since we've seen it. People will forget, right? Unless you're a
I didn't
12-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my question is, okay, so disintegrating the communication, that's kind of a big risk. Like throwing it and having it being disintegrated disconnected the link. But I guess my thing is, could it have just made them stuck forever? But it didn't, magically.
Yeah. It could have, but they were also about to die anyway. So it's like, you have to do something.
Yeah. I mean, if you're transferring a file and your like network goes down, you don't like get the rest of the file. I mean, you just like what parts of the file are where they are is where they stay, right? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
and then how come Herod and Salas never woke up in the SGC? When they put the stones on the device in the Ori planet, shouldn't Herod and Salas have woken up? But they acted like it was Daniel who woke up and said something about the Ori. But shouldn't it have been Herod?
Yeah, you're right.
I thought it was Herod. I thought it was Herod waking up and talking. I thought they do say something like, Daniel was awake for a second, but he didn't make any sense. And I thought they were making it sound like it was Herod waking up and not knowing where he was.
Okay.
And then they were active until the prior showed up at their house and pulled the stones or blew up the thing or whatever he did. So yeah, I thought they did. I thought it was them waking up.
Okay. That's actually good then.
Okay.
Yeah, that's actually pretty
That would have been
the
the proper thing. I got confused.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't make it super clear.
I kind of like I kind of like faded out. I watched it twice, once with the commentary, but I just kind of like faded out by then. I was like, something's happening on the screen.
I watched it with my husband yesterday and I go, I think I'm gonna have to watch this again because and he goes, no, don't.
No, yeah. Julian Sands is good. He was really good in this. He's good in everything. He plays the bad guy very well.
See, I remember him. He was in A Room with a View from I
haven't seen that.
Gosh, forever ago.
Yeah. But yeah, that was in the 80s. Yeah. Young, I guess. Yeah. I just remember him from Buffy and then Galaxy Quest. And then he did a lot of voice acting in video games, I think, too. So of the early 2000s. Yeah. Unfortunately, we lost him last year. when he was hiking in California and went missing, and then they found him several months later. So,
Oh, wow.
Oh, that was
Yeah.
him. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I remember that. I didn't
me
realize
either.
that was him.
yeah, yeah, I think
Okay.
it was like 60 in mid 60s or something. Yeah, 65 or something, 63. I don't know.
Oh, wow. And I did look up Lou Gossett Jr., 6'4".
Yeah. Okay, there you go. Yeah,
So he is, because I noticed when he and Christopher Judge were walking down the hallway, Teal'c, he was bigger. I mean,
yeah.
shoulders and everything. And Christopher Judge is a big guy. So, like, never thought of him as being Lou Gossett Jr. as being a tall guy.
Yeah, but if you want a little Teal'c, I just saw in Gate World that Funko is now accepting pre-orders for the Teal'c Funko Pop.
I did
so
see
the
that.
Samantha Carter and
Yeah,
the Teal'c Funko Pops. So,
And I got to
And I
say,
think-
I'm jealous. On some of these sites, I'm seeing that people had advent calendars, like Stargate advent calendars. I'm like,
Oh, wow.
man, did not know about that.
My 12-year-old son has kind of taken over my 3D printer and has been on a printing tear. And I need to ask Joseph Malazzi this on X if I can, but he printed a puddle jumper that actually has retractable engine and weapons pods
What?
and stuff with like little drones in them, and the pods come out and stuff. And he also printed a space gate, but he's wondering if the puddle jumper was stationary and if the space gate, had velocity and was moving towards the puddle jumper, and, the gate enveloped the puddle jumper, would the puddle jumper have velocity when it exited the Stargate on the other side? Because the puddle jumper itself doesn't have velocity, but the gate does. So I need to ask Joseph Malazzi that and see if he can answer that. Maybe by next episode I'll do that and have an answer.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, it's an interesting.
Assuming it would just go through and like plop on the ground or wherever it lands. If it doesn't have velocity.
Yeah, it doesn't have velocity, but the gate does. So relative to the puddle jumper, the gate is moving. So does that translate into forward velocity for the puddle jumper is the question. And so if you haven't, if you let us know on Discord or let us know in the comments here on this video, what you think
if you're
would
secretly a wormhole physicist, working
wormhole extremist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you have forbidden your son from making any replicator blocks, right?
Yes, he does not dabble in replicators.
Okay, good. Because that would creep me out.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's I like Julian Sands. The episode looks good for the time constraints they were under. We get a cool little wall of fire that the Ori apparently are. And this is, very consciously, it's like, well, what if the ancients were like ascended and the Ori lived in hell or something? But it's about about as deep as the metaphor goes, right? So.
Oh, and we learned that is it Dosi? Dochai. How did you say
Dosi. Yeah, we'll just say, Dosai.
Dosai. That he can, I guess, when he gets close to the fire and he can like channel the Ori can speak through him.
Yeah.
So we learned that they spoke directly to Daniel through him.
They're pretty sharp, just not the best conversationalists, I guess.
Yeah. I was thinking, Daniel and Vala had to sit through a prostration for 6 hours?
Yeah.
In Avalon. And then they were locked in that room for how long? And he sat there and read the book. And I'm like, did you not get much of that? Like,
he knew to ask to talk to the, those who speak. He like flipped to the page. So it's clear he passed his prostration exam. So, no, sorry. But no, it's clear that he had read the book, which was written in, I guess, ancient or Alteran or whatever we're calling them now. So.
And I thought Vala was being pretty calm for Vala.
Yeah.
All she was doing was eating an apple and he's giving her grief. And I'm like, dude, usually she's doing so much worse than that. Leave her alone. Like, shh.
Well, she also had just gotten burned alive.
Yeah.
So maybe
she'd be making out with a lamp or something.
Yeah. You don't mess with the kids when they're being quiet.
Spritz bottle, spray bottle. Down, Vala, down. Stop it.
Yeah. She's supposed to be leaving. She's not.
Yeah. But so any other thoughts or comments or feelings about this?
No, I think they do get better. Like I think this was kind of a rough start overall, but I think they get better, at least in terms of like the weekly episodes. Like maybe the overall plot's not, but they do get back to some of the adventure of the week sometimes, and like we have to go solve this problem on this planet. Most of it's related to fighting the Ori now, but there are some fun kind of episodes along the way. So
Yeah.
um,
You're right. We get to see Ball again. We get to see Braytac. We get a little bit of episodes bouncing around, and I don't know when we get Carter back, but we will get our SG1 team at some point, sort of back.
and I think the next episode the one where they have to go on the side quest to figure out, because Vol and Daniel are still linked. And they have to go on the side quest to find the device that started or whatever.
Yes,
like who
with the guy
traded it
from
for-
The Princess Bride.
Oh, who's in it?
The guy from The Princess Bride. I can't think of his name.
Carrie Ellis?
No. The one that's like never go in against the Sicilian when death is on the line.
Oh,
that one.
Wallace Shawn. That's
The
right.
one
He
with
is. Yeah.
Yeah. No hair.
I do remember them like wasting a lot of guest stars, like in the ninth, and like Fred Willard is in an episode and completely wasted.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. And I will say though that if you want to re-experience SG1, there is a new automated account on X or Twitter called Every SG1 Frame, or Every Stargate Frame in Order. And they started with the movie about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they don't really show every frame. I think they're showing like one frame a second.
Mm-hmm.
But so every like hour or so, they show the next second of, they went through the entire movie, and now they've started Children of the Gods. So
oh wow,
probably by the time you watch this, they'll be, into like episode 2 or 3 of season 1. But if you go to Every SG1 Frame on X, your timeline will constantly be updated with a frame from SG1 episode in order of sequence. So it's a fun way to relive the series and say, oh, I do remember that happening. I do remember there being a muddy frame of a car driving up to Cheyenne Mountain in Children of the Gods. Yeah.
Okay, I'm following it right now. There we go.
Yeah.
Oh, followed by Victor Lamb. See, found it.
There we go. Yeah.
I was going to say, if you want to also just random episode of whatever's going on, if you have Comet TV, which I do on Fubo, and they do 4 or 5 episodes back to back a day.
Wow.
They just run them. It's kind of like when I was in law school watching Law and Order nonstop. It's like you can catch like 5 episodes in a row. And like I said, I've been sick, so laying on the couch a lot. And I think they were on season. I think one day I looked at it was like season 4. The next day I looked at it was season 5. The next, it's like, think about it, 5 episodes a day. You get through a season really fast. So it's kind of fun just to see what's on.
Yeah, I put on just like, I was like, I want to watch I want to watch an episode of Stargate, but I don't want to watch the one I'm supposed to watch for the podcast. So I put on like an episode from season 3, and I think it's the one where like Daniel gets possessed or something. I didn't really remember it, and like I was like, wow, the show looked like, granted it was like 7 years before season 10, but it looked really rough. It's like, oh wow, I forgot like how like grainy and muddy it was when it was filmed on like 16 millimeter,
Yeah.
And
it's come a long way.
Yeah, it has. Yeah, it's fun to like just pick a old episode at random and rewatch it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I also have been finding some debates on Facebook and some Stargate groups.
Oh, really?
Of people debating about universe, which has been super fun.
Yeah, I can't say I'm looking forward to rewatching it, but maybe with the benefit of like knowing a little bit more about its production, how it was never intended to be a Stargate show, but the network wanted them to make it a Stargate show, how that might influence things a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it should be interesting. I'm looking forward to some of this.
I love seeing all this out there, because if you think about it, the show, no Stargate show has been on the air in a decade.
Yeah.
And you go back SG1 to the very beginning, you're talking 25 years, and the fandom is so strong still. and dedicated. And I just love that people take all this time to do all these crazy things. Not just us here every week talking about it, but there's people who are doing a lot more than we are. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, and picking up new fans all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that we see in this episode Dr. Lindsay return for her second of 3 appearances. She was in the first episode of the season as kind of the language geek who Mitchell did not pick for his team, but here is an anthropologist on away missions. Apparently, there was a scene cut that kind of referred back to that scene between her and Mitchell when Mitchell first comes through the gate on the planet where they've discovered the Ori. There was a scene written between Lindsay and Mitchell that kind of built on that, but then they had to cut that for time, unfortunately, as this episode was running over. So I would have liked to have seen that. If it exists someplace, I'll try and find it, because I would like to have seen how she went from like being that weird kind of like language person to becoming super competent in this episode. But yeah, and then she's in an episode of Atlantis coming up as well. So awesome. Any other thoughts?
We hit our 38 minutes.
We did. The gate's shutting down. Interesting languages here. We had in French, we had Le Livre des Origines, or des Origines, which is the Book of Origins. That seemed to be what most of the languages went with, except for Italian. We got Gli Dei del Fuoco, which is the gods of fire. So I think that's pretty cool too.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
No Japanese.
It was just the Book of Origins. I didn't feel like picking on.
I think I read that this episode originally was supposed to be called Avalon Part 3.
Yeah, and they had enough footage to make an Avalon Part 4, but they limited themselves to Kigen no Sho, the Book of Origin in Japanese.
Okay.
There. But in other news, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Secrets of Stargate, including Father Leo H., John N., Elizabeth T., Carrie B., and James I. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Stargate and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give, and be sure to follow the show on Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or find our video versions at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. And to find previous episodes of Secret of Stargate and to send feedback, please visit sqpn.com/Stargate. And you can email us at stargate@sqpn. We've gotten some interesting emails there. Apparently some Hollywood legends want to appear on our podcast that we've never heard of, but keep sending the emails, or follow StarQuest on social media at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia or on X at SQPN. And we'll be back next time with the next episode of Atlantis Runner.
Yay!
Yay! with Aqualad. Until then, Jeff Haecker, thank you for joining us and sharing the secrets of Stargate.
Thanks, Victor.
And Lisa Jones, thank you as well.
Thanks, Victor.
Thanks. And I'm Victor Lamps. And thank you for listening to the Secrets of Stargate on StarQuest. And remember, wherever you go, there you are. I think that's Buckaroo Banzai.
Anyway, I'm sorry, but that just happens to be how I feel about it. What do you think?